Welcome in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mac, John McMullen. We're here live to close out the week strong on Birds 365 as we inch closer to training camp. Give us follows on X at Zander Krause and at JF McMullen. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Football Friday, brother?
Doing well. Creeping up closer. Little Devontae Smith softball action this weekend for people up in the Lehigh Valley, Allentown. When these things start to happen, it's getting closer, and people are gonna come back to town, and still a little bit early for that. But if you're up there, I encourage you to go to that for charity. Devontae's annual softball game is tomorrow. And you'll have AJ Brown typically does a youth football camp later in the summer, right before training camp. So we'll see if that happens. But and you just saw Jason Kelsey's disturbing Team 62 challenge. So a lot of that stuff going on.
Yeah, tons of it, man, going on. Did you see Cooper DeJean down there running around?
Down
There. I'm like the Eagles front office must watch this with their, like this. I mean, he's running on parade floats after chugging a beer. Knees are slipping all over the place. I'm like, boy, that's got to give me agita from Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. But it's good they're having fun. Let's hope they're ready to go for the season, John.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I mean,
yeah, you never have been one to worry about stuff.
No, well, like Cooper DeJean, they're a good example. I mean, he's whatever he is. I don't even think he's turned 23 yet. But
no, he turned 22 in the Super Bowl, remember?
Yeah, so he's 22 years old. He didn't become the great athlete he is by sitting around. You're 22, you do stuff, and you have fun, and that's just part of life. So can weird things happen? Yeah, I remember some guy tearing his ACL on the beach once, a running back. I have to look up, but I mean, there's nothing. You got to live your life.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm just saying.
That's why, he's 22 years old. He's going to be fine.
I do get a kick out of it, though, John. I mean, this guy has been on the parade float since they won that Super Bowl. He hasn't left the tri-state area.
Oh no, he's been back in Iowa. He did his big celebrity.
I know, but he's been killing it, man, all over the place. Down the Jersey Shore, he popped back to Iowa for a little bit. He's back in here, up at the Jersey Shore. He's having fun, man. Cooper DeJean. He's enjoying the stardom.
Yeah, good for him. I mean, a great rookie season. A big part of this team. We've talked about Vic Fangio's obviously enamored with his ability and should be. But he and that's another thing when you talk about the partying and the enjoyment and I don't worry too much about Cooper because he's 22. Now maybe if he's 32, I'd say something different, but he's 22. He's going to bounce back.
Yeah, no, he'll be good. I'm not worried about him. I just get a kick out of watching him run on parade floats. Sidney Brown's out there. It was funny watching it. So good stuff. They're all having a little bit of fun down the Jersey Shore. Johnny Mac, we've been following along on the 25 list, so we'll continue on that today. We got a couple other good segments. Did you happen to prep for your top 10 Eagles you have covered, Johnny Mac?
I thought about it. I didn't write down the top 10 list because it's really.
You got some names though, right?
I got some names. So we intimated some of them yesterday, but it's so because it's 2025. You've seen a couple quarter century teams. I'm like, I think NFL.com did one, and then or ESPN did one, whatever, and CBS did one, and Jeff Kerr did an Eagles one, and I'm like, I don't like those things because I'm like, well, it's about how many years they played. Did they cross over from the 90s to the 2000s? Like, where's the level?
Yeah, right.
So from that standpoint, it's the same thing with me, covering the team since 2016. All right, well, how much does the guys, what they did before 2016 factor into it? It's from that standpoint, it's just, it's just you set up a point and you say, okay, well, how meaningful is that? But the certain players we'll talk about are obviously, and I mentioned a couple potential Hall of Famers yesterday, are obvious, and they should be obvious to everyone.
Obviously, yep. We'll talk about a little bit of that later on in the show. And then I want to talk a little Zach Bond, and obviously we'll do your top 25. We'll reveal who number 18 on the list is. I'm going to talk a little Zach Bond. And then starting next week, everybody, what I'm going to do is I want to do the rookie spotlight. Now, I know we've already talked about some rookies. We talked about Ty yesterday. We talked about Antoine, but I'm going to reset the slate as we get closer to training camp. I think it's a fun thing to do to kind of prep for the rookies, and we'll do that a little bit starting next week, a rookie spotlight each day. So we'll do that. Maybe Mac McWilliams, John. We haven't talked much about Mac McWilliams here in the offseason. Now, maybe he's got to earn it. He's got to earn the conversation on Birds 365, but we'll give him a little love starting next week. So we'll do all that. Johnny Mac, let's get into the top 25. Brother, we're down to number 18 on the list. Yesterday at 19 was Jalen Hunt, preceded by Jake Elliott, Keely Ringo, Jahan Dotson, Adoree Jackson, Matt Pryor, and Jahad Campbell and Drew Makuba. That goes all the way up to 25 with the tie at 25. We are officially down to number 18 on the list. Johnny Mac, the floor is yours once again. Reveal who is number 18 on the Ed Kratz, John McMullen Sports Illustrated Top 25 Eagles list.
Yeah, I think this number is significant for, I think, a couple reasons. One, a young ascending player that I think everybody's pretty high on. Moro Ojomo is number 18. And I also think this is the demarcation line. Like everybody above this list is really good. And this is sort of the end of the projection / rehabilitation, reclamation group. Prove it group if you throw Matt Pryor in there. This is the demarcation line. So you get to 17 and you go, damn, there's a lot of good players on this team.
Right.
And the interesting part is last year there were even more. Last year they were even deeper. You get down to almost 22, which is there's 22 starters. That's why I used that.
Right.
You could almost get that deep.
You don't have that list of from last year's team, do you? Anywhere, do you?
I don't, but you see the players. I can look it up, but you see the players that they lost. I mean, Josh would obviously be
right.
On
Josh
this
would
list.
be in here. Yeah,
Milton
I was just wondering who would have
list.
been like 18, 19, 20 as compared to this year, where you have Ojomo, Hunt, and Elliott.
Yeah, and Milton Williams, Slay obviously would be much higher. And even guys, I remember Rodgers made the list. He was probably 24, 25.
Right.
And that's, how it turned out. But I think also I think yesterday was disrespect season. I joked about people only complain, obviously, about the list that they don't like. They don't talk much about the list they do like. Like, I saw PFF rank their top 10 defensive lines in the NFL today. And so they were ranking it. And again, this is one person at PFF. This is not PFF, but it's just the list. And they ranked the Eagles number 2.
Wow.
And this is the encompassing of the interior and the edge rushers, not just, you could say
the whole D-line, the whole front.
Yeah, the whole defensive front. They probably should use that term, by the way, defensive front. They ranked them number 2 to behind Pittsburgh, and ahead number 3 was the New York Giants, a team we talked about and said, that they got a really good defensive front. They might not have much else, but at least on paper, they have a really good defensive front. They ranked them number 2. And they lost Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and Brandon Graham. And they ranked them number 2, which I think is insanity.
I don't think they're the number 2 defensive front in the league coming in.
No.
I think they maybe had that upside, but that's a lot of hope.
Yeah. But nobody's going to complain about that one.
Wait, did you see what they had? They did this a couple of days ago too with the linebackers. Did you see where the Eagles linebackers fell?
I did not.
They're
Probably
one. Yeah,
one or two. I mean,
yeah.
it's ironic. They were probably 32 last year. They might have been.
I know.
It might have been.
And now the same the same guy that's the reason they were 32 last year is the same guy that's the reason they're number one now this year.
Exactly. Which tells you about Liz, but yeah, when it's good, you like it. When it's bad, you hate it. But yeah, they have a lot of upside on the defensive front. I'd agree with that. Because I mean, 19 was Alex Hunt on this list, 18 is Moro Ojomo. Those are the two guys. They're it. You know, Moro's got to replace Milton for the most part, and Alex has to replace Josh Sweat for the most part. Could they do it? Yeah, sure, of course. Will they do it to that level? I wouldn't bet on it, but they both have a chance to be really good players. I agree with that sentiment. And Moro, you know, it's interesting because there's, you know, the Eagles were so good last year and obviously exemplified by the Super Bowl. You have Jalen Carter, which everybody will acknowledge is one of the best 3 or 4 defensive tackles in football and only getting better. You have Milton Williams, who earned $26 million annual average value contract. And then you have Jordan Davis, who sort of toggles between nose tackle, very good player. We talked about him a lot. And Moro Ojomo. And the irony is with the great pass rushing and everybody talking about Jalen Carter and he saved the season and Milton in the Super Bowl. Moro Ojomo, very Bryce Hupp-like, had the best pressure percentage of all 3.
Wow.
Now, can that translate to a whole heck of a lot more snaps? Like it didn't work with Bryce Hupp outside, at least early. We'll see what happens in San Francisco. Can it project? Now, the good thing is that Moro gets to play next to Jalen Carter for the most part. So he won't be seeing many double teams. That'll help, just like it helped Milton Williams. So I would say, and I've said this a couple times on the show, of all the young players the Eagles are counting on, this one might be the one I'm highest on. And part of that reason is because he gets to play next to Jalen Carter.
Yeah, and it's somewhat proven. I mean, it's not proven at the level it needs to be this year, but he did play, 388 snaps, I think it was last year?
490, including the Super Bowl.
Including playoffs, right? I think it was
including
388
playoffs.
regular season, so 490 with the playoffs, which is a pretty significant number of snaps, John. I mean, it's not a
it was more than Jordan Davis, which I think a lot of people don't realize. But that's because the Eagles were so effective defensively, and they didn't have to go to the 5-man fronts as much as they would have thought, because they were able to stop the run with 4 most of the time effectively. And if you can do that, you know, you're not going to roll out the 5-man front. So he had a very good season, very gifted player, another young guy. He was drafted very young. You know, he went to Texas at, I don't know, like 16. Tremendously smart. Again, that's the theme with the Eagles. High IQ guy.
Yeah.
And he's just very athletic. Now, he's also undersized, which, you know, Vic will bring up when he talks about him all the time. But that's the way the NFL's going. And until somebody does what the Eagles do to the Eagles, which is easier said than done, because you got to spend half a decade building an offensive line and then find an all-pro running back, which it's like, that's easy to say, copy what the Eagles do. You got to spend a lot of time to do that. and nobody has the patience, or very few have the patience to do that. So they're pretty safe. Unless you go to the Super Bowl and play Baltimore, and maybe they could do it. But they played, for one game, as they did in the regular season last year. They were able to handle that effectively. Could they do it for 17 games with all the undersized players? Probably not, but they don't have to.
What extent do you think those snaps increase for more? I mean, obviously it's going to be a lot, but last year 490, including the playoffs, is a pretty significant number. Now with no Milton Williams here, to what extent does that snap count go up, John? How far do you think it goes? Is it 1,000 snaps this year, or is it more of a rotation? What do you think?
Yeah, no, that 1,000 that's Jalen Carter territory. Which even that you say, well, how?
Yeah, how is Jalen Carter doing?
How is that? And we asked Vic that over the spring, and he said basically, he's a young pup, which he is. But that'll change as the year goes by. But no, he's not going to be up. Jalen was at over 1,000 when you include the playoffs. More if you look at Milton Williams, which is 600, 680, I think. That's where you got to get the difference, which isn't as drastic as you would assume, because Moro played, I think, as I said, 653 was Milton exactly. And again, that includes the postseason. And Moro was 480. So that's the difference you're talking about.
650 included the postseason for Milton.
Yeah, 653.
That's not as much as I thought.
Well, it's a rotational position. Jordan Davis, and it's going to continue to be a rotational position. So you're going to have Jordan, whose snaps should go up, and you're going to have maybe Ty Robinson, maybe Thomas Booker, whoever the fourth guy is, will factor in as well. And I think you want to, if you can, you want to get Jalen Carter down a little bit. So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, and I don't think Moro's just going from 480 to 653. I think that'll be split over him and Jordan Davis for the most part. And, you continue that trajectory. But the more effective he is, that's the old thing. The Eagles will talk about Fletcher Cox, and every year they'd say, we got to get his snap count lower.
Right.
And then they're in a tough game in the fourth quarter. They're not taking him off the field.
And they're not taking him off the field. Exactly.
So if Moro,
kind of reminds me of the run pass ratio, John, where it's like, I'd like to get his snap count down, but let me see what happens in the games before I can confirm that one.
Yeah. Well, the same thing with Saquon. It's like,
yeah, right.
It's yeah. And Nick, I think, which is interesting. Hayden Winks, I believe he's a big stat guy, tweeted something yesterday about Saquon's touches. So we just talked about 2025. It's a quarter century. The only players had more touches in a season than Saquon Barkley over the past 25 years is DeMarco Murray, coming off his great season in Dallas when he was Offensive Player of the Year, and then he came to Philadelphia the next season. It wasn't great. DeMarco had 497 in 18 games, 16 regular season, and 2 playoff games for the 2014 Cowboys. The next year he went to the Eagles. It wasn't good, as people remember. And he went from 497 to 237. Because he just wasn't effective. The Cowboys ran him into the ground because they knew they weren't keeping him. That's not what the Eagles did. They were just trying to win football games. But the reality is Saquon finished with 482 touches in 20 games. 482 touches. Now, what Hayden did, he went back to since 2000, there have been 47 running backs that have 400 or more touches and played the next season. the medium outcome for the following season is 311. So, whether it's ineffectiveness, whether it's just wear and tear, to go from 400 down, and again, that's medium. Money guys were lower, some were higher. But it'd be very hard to replicate 482 touches is the point.
Yeah, right.
And how do you limit that while you're trying to win games? That's an interesting question for Nick Sirianni. To date, it has been, we're going to do what we need to do to win the game.
Yeah, right.
And then figure out the rest.
Right.
But how long is that sustainable? Nobody knows. The Eagles don't know. Nobody knows. So this is what the offseason is for. You bring your hands, over analysis. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to give him 25 touches today. Maybe you don't need 25 touches, hopefully.
Right.
Maybe you need 35.
Yeah, right.
Maybe you need 40. So, yeah, it's difficult. Similar thing with snap counts for a guy like Jalen Carter. That's why I brought it up.
Right.
And certainly Moro as a young player. And he's undersized too. It's not like, all right, well, just you take Milton's snaps, and he was already a big part of the rotation himself. So somebody's got to take his snaps, and it's that layered effect where, well, he's bumping up, and then here comes Thomas Booker or Ty Robinson. But according to PFF, the good news is they still have the second best defensive front in football.
What do you think Moro Ojomo has to work on, John, coming in this offseason here coming in? He graded out very highly last year as a pass rusher. I think it was like an 82.6 grade or something like that on PFF, which really is a really good grade. What's the offseason focus for Moro Ojomo now with the expected increased role and more on his shoulders to, be one of the anchors on that defensive line?
Yeah, well, I think with Moro, it's the other stuff. It's not the pass rush.
Yeah, right.
So,
it's the run, right? I mean, he wasn't great.
And again, he's undersized. So, how much can you hold up? And that's the old give and take. And, again, I've gone back to the New Orleans game early in the season when Vic wasn't very happy with the run support in the first couple of games, and he rolled out the 6-man fronts and shut that down pretty quickly. That's Vic's pretty simple, man. Is it going well or is it not going well?
Right.
And if he can't stop the run with 4, he's going to put 5 out there. If he can't stop the run with 5, and I'm talking about up front, he's going to put 6 up front. Like, he'll do what he needs to do. But the goal is to be at the end of last season, the Eagles were so effective stopping the football run, the running game with 4-man fronts, they didn't have to do a lot of the other stuff. Are they going to be that effective this year? Probably not. But we'll see. That's the goal. He always wants the extra guy in coverage. So if he can get away with it, it'll be a 4-man front. That, I think, ironic, that's the difference between Milton Williams and the projection of going to Moro Ojomo. I think Moro's going to be fine as a pass rusher. I don't know if he's going to be as well-rounded as Milton, at least this early in his career.
Yeah. I mean, the positive was you did give that stat a little bit ago, John, on the the interior pass rush win rate? Was it 18% or something like that? I think you mentioned.
Pressure percentage. He was up over 20. He was ahead of Milton and Jalen Carter.
Right.
Now,
yeah,
again,
I think on Bleeding Green 8. Let me look up Bleeding Green 8. I thought I saw something on Bleeding Green 8.
Yeah, there's different. I mean, that's the point.
Well, no, that's impressive too. This one's just as impressive. It's just a little bit of a different stat. Yeah, 18.2 is the second highest win rate for interior defenders on the inside, second to only Chris Jones. So he was winning, man, on the interior.
Yeah. And again, that doesn't factor in what Jalen Carter faces. Nobody's going to say All right, Milton Williams and Moro Ojomo are better pass rushers.
Yeah, no. I mean, the reason that they're winning that much is because of Jalen Carter. I think anybody who watches the Eagles knows that, but maybe for the outside viewer, they might not understand that.
Yeah, and that's why some of those stats are hinky, but
stats are always hinky. But how do we quantify, whether Moro is replacing Milton effectively? I mean, I know it's obviously what it looks like as a whole.
Well,
but
Vic will tell you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But what is
Vic,
it?
Vic will tell you. Yeah, I mean that it's pretty simple. It's going to be difficult to do it because they were a dominant defense, especially late in the season. And Milton was pretty obvious in his impact. You're going to be able to tell from the naked eye, and like I said, Vic will get asked the question week after week, and he will be bluntly honest. And I don't think they're expecting him to replace, as I said, Milton Williams. I think from their standpoint, it's about the old "it takes a village" mentality. Well, part of it's going to be Jordan Davis, part of it's going to be Moro Ojomo, part of it's going to be Ty Robinson or Thomas Booker. You just do it a different way. It's more spread out. But definitely his main role is going to be, he's going to be one of the guys on the field in third in obvious passing situations. So third and 7+, he's going to be on the field next to Jalen Carter, and that's going to be his main impact on the team. I could even see if somebody else steps up, like I could see, and the obvious name is Jordan Davis if it's a 4-man front. Like if they're going to open a game with a 4-man front, your starters are going to be Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis with a 4-man front. Obviously, Jordan's a starter in a 5-man front. Then it would be Jordan at nose and a 5-man with Jalen Carter and Moro Ojomo would be a starter at 4-eye. But if they play as much 4-man front as they did last year because they're effective, that's going to be Jordan Davis.
That was kind of what I was going to ask next. Like how much versatility do you think Vic would have in using him in some of those rotational sub packages and all the things he do? One tech, stunt packages. I mean, he's really fast, the Jomo, right? Isn't that one of his traits? He's got elite foot speed. People call it, which I've always found to be a funny term, but that's what he's got.
Well, he's very quick. I think more important, 40 times always are, like who cares? You ever see defensive linemen run 40 yards?
Yeah, right. 40 yards downfield.
If they're chasing somebody for a 50-yard game, you'd like to hustle, but it's not important is what I'm saying. So, but he's very quick for his size. And that's the more important part. He's also very strong for his size. Just undersized guy, and he's getting bigger, and he's been in an NFL weight room, and that's part of his success and stopping up and moving forward. But if you look at where he was, this is a guy who, he wasn't a 5-star recruit, but he was all the usual suspects: Alabama, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Oregon. He got recruited by everybody. So, same thing we talk about. Why is Antoine Powell-Ryland, why is he a 6th-round pick after what he did? Well, he doesn't have the traits you typically look for. He's not Chris Jones physically. He's not Fletcher Cox physically. He's not Jalen Carter physically. He's undersized to the point where Vic brings it up constantly. And that can be a problem. But I don't see a lot of teams taking advantage. I've been talking about that for years, like how undersized the Eagles are getting on defense.
Yeah.
And it hasn't seemed to have affected them because I often say the Eagles defense was better than the Eagles offense last season. They were,
but they
couldn't stop the Eagles.
I love that. I love that phrase from you.
Yeah.
Because
they're just not big enough, and they get bullied by the Eagles offense. But the good news is they only have to face the Eagles offense in practice.
John, a quiet part of the Ojomo story, at least in my opinion, is that was a 7th-round pick not too long ago, man. Pretty impressive that he's coming into the year. He had over 400, 490 snaps or whatever it was last year. Pretty effective snaps. And now the Eagles are going to be relying on him as a big piece of their rotation on the defensive line. Evidently, the second best defensive line in the league. All right, subjective.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But pretty impressive, man. 7th-round draft pick for the Eagles and Moro Ojomo, and here he is getting significant reps and using them and playing well. I think that's pretty impressive for him, man. We talk about a lot about Mailata. I'm not saying this is that level of story, but anytime you have a 7th-round pick that produces at a high level, I think it's worth noting. So pretty good stuff on Moro Ojomo, man.
Yeah, and I always talk about opportunity. He didn't play at all as a rookie, basically. Didn't play
this is
at all.
Year 3 for him?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he'll have 2 more years here still.
And, he stepped up into what was supposed to be the 4th role and became even bigger. And now it's his time to step up, and maybe he does it again. But the most difficult step is the last step when you're one of the key guys playing major reps, and conditioning plays a part of it as well. From his standpoint, it's not about, we're talking about conditioning. I think people assume it's a Jordan Davis type thing. Well, he's a big guy, got to keep his weight down, got to get on the Peloton. But it also means it can mean other stuff with undersized guys. Like, is he physically equipped to handle 700 snaps in the NFL? We're going to see.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot of talent. And that's been the Eagles' history. They find, and Howie, people got to see it on Unscripted, their web show. People got to see the passion meeting for the first time, and him encouraging his scouts to look for guys who could developmental. Talked about with the Sixers yesterday versus the Eagles in town. You don't draft somebody and it's over. You don't draft a good or a bad player. You got to develop them. And that's more so for day 3 picks than anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to get them to that level, and that's what the Eagles have done a very good job with that.
No doubt.
Position.
No doubt. Johnny Mac, after, so by the way, everybody, number 18 on the list of the top 25, that's Moro Ojomo. We just talked about him for a little bit. Great segment there talking about Ojomo. He comes in at number 18 on Johnny Mac and Ed Kratz's Sports Illustrated top 25 Eagles list. So we're moving our way right down that list so far. Pretty good list. It was Ojomo today. Yesterday at 19, it was Jalix Hunt. 20 for Jake Elliott. 21 for Keely Ringo. 22, Jahan Dotson. 23 was Adoree Jackson. 24, Matt Pryor. And 25 was the rookies, Jahad Campbell and Drew McCoupa. So we're moving right along on that top 25 list, and pretty good. John said there's an uptick in the talent level now once you get to 17, which is a good thing. John, look at after on the depth chart. Look at after Moro Ojomo. You got Thomas Booker, Gabe Hall, Ty Robinson. Who do you think steps up the most behind those guys? I know we talked about Ty yesterday, so we kind of discussed this a little bit, but I do think there's some interesting names. We had a commenter, Caleb, in the chat, saying, seems like they really like Booker. Can we talk about him a little bit? So I don't know what you think about how those snaps are going to kind of fall this year. If Ojomo, in theory, steps up into the Milton Williams role, who kind of fills the Ojomo role? We talked about it maybe being Ty Robinson.
Yeah, well, I got to put it. We were just talking about Booker yesterday. Come on. I got all this in the shows, guys. I said I'm the only one. Like, everybody's defaulting, and I just wrote about this on Sports Illustrated.
Defaulting to Ty. You roasted me on it.
Yeah, I brought up Thomas because they like Thomas Booker, and he's got some versatility, and he's a 300-pound guy, so he can he can be the backup nose tackle, although, you know, obviously you don't want to do it a lot, but he can also play all the different techniques at you know, the positions Jalen Carter, Moro Ojomo play. So he's got some versatility. He can play inside and outside. I still think the goal is to get Ty Robinson up to speed as much as possible. But so he's the favorite. I would acknowledge that. But they're not, if he doesn't perform well this summer and Thomas Booker beats him out, they'll have no problem playing Thomas Booker. No problem. And he's another guy, much like Moro, very smart, Stanford guy. We call him Senator Booker, Ed and I. He's probably going to be a senator after he gives up football. That's how smart he is.
If he's that smart, Thomas, if you're listening and you're that smart, don't go be a politician.
Yeah, well, exactly. I don't know.
Great in the world,
he's too nice of a guy to be a scumbag politician.
Yeah,
that's
right.
the part where it derails. But yeah, I agree with that part. But yeah, anyway, he's people should be paying more attention to him. And he himself was a 5th round pick for coming out with Houston before the Eagles brought him in. So it's not like he's a guy who didn't have potential himself coming out, and he's still relatively young at 25. And I also brought up, don't sleep on Byron Young either.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, nobody brings that guy up. And he was a 3rd round pick in 2023. And he wasn't like a Jalix Hunt 3rd round pick. He was near the top of the 3rd round. 70, I think he was 70th overall. And he's an Alabama guy. And he's got some
Byron Young.
Las Vegas. So that's another thing. You know, shitty organization. Hopefully they're getting better with, you know, the people. They brought in a bunch of Eagles guys this offseason. And John Spytek, who's the new GM, who used to work for the Eagles back in the day. And they brought in Brandon Hunt and oh boy. They brought in another personnel executive. I'll think of the name in a second. But so they're trying to break off, and obviously Pete Carroll's there. So they're getting better. But when Young was there, it's a pretty bad organization.
Yeah, what's that guy's name? The other guy's name that left from the Eagles.
Yeah, I'm blanking, but I'll come up with it. A longtime college scouting director. Boy, I'm blanking. But another one. Sanders put me on the spot.
Sorry, bro. My bad, Johnny.
But anyway, getting back to the point of Byron Young and
Anthony Patch.
Anthony Patch, thank you. Getting back to Byron Young, in spring practices when they were using the 5-man front, which was rare, he was playing nose tackle. So they're clearly looking for a backup nose tackle, and it's going to be Booker or Young, and they both have the versatility to do different things. So all those guys, and even Gabe Hall's a little bit, I would say, down because he's more of a tweener. In fact, if you look at him, he's like 6'6", 295. He looks like an old school 4-3 defensive end, like an old school base left end,
right?
Which you really don't have in the modern game. So it's kind of difficult. You know, Jordan Davis is 6'6", but he's also 340, 350, whatever. 6'6", so you're going to have some leverage problems. And under 300 pounds, you're probably going to get pushed around. So Gabe was undrafted, and that's probably why, because he's just too light to play inside and probably not quick enough to play outside. So I would focus on Ty Robinson, Thomas Booker, and Byron Young. But yeah, we've talked about Thomas Booker. Love him.
Johnny Mac, big Thomas Booker guy. We will see how it all shakes out in the defensive line. John, good segment, man. Moro Ojomo coming in at 18. We got plenty more to talk about. We're going to do the top 10 Eagles that John covered here since he's been here since 2016. So we'll do that. I do want to reference the collusion case or non-collusion case. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. I'm going to get John's take on that. We'll do that, and then we'll talk a little Zach Vaughn as well. Sorry, I got something in my eyeball. Appreciate everybody for being here, though. Great opening segment, Johnny Mac, on Moro Ojomo. As we get further down the list, we're all optimistic on Moro Ojomo, and that defensive line needs him to have a good year, John.
Yeah, they do. Well, maybe they don't. They got the second best defensive front in football, so maybe they don't. Yeah, I did. That to me, the whole defensive front and the potential of being number 2 in football is wholly on Moro Ojomo and Jalen Hunt.
Big statement there. We'll see if those guys can live up to it and do it for the Birds. Great stuff. Appreciate everybody being here today. There's a little change on YouTube's front. If you're listening to the show on YouTube, we have many listeners who listen to the podcast, so this doesn't concern you. But we got new usernames or something. They don't use your guys' regular names. Now they're using usernames. So I'm going to have to decipher who is who now. So don't be changing profile pictures on me too much, everybody. John Secunda has become Flying Mayan. Twiz, you're still Twiz. Great tech buy. I think that's Hollywood Hogan back there. I don't know who that is. So I got to decipher who the heck you guys are.
What the heck is YouTube doing?
What they used to do is that people can use names, and I could make 50 profiles that are titled John McMullen, but I can only have one profile that has the @name, the username @John McMullen. So I guess they're trying to get away from too much repetitive usernames, I guess you will, or user, and then go into these. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
No, John, I just roll with the punches, man.
I encourage everybody to use their real names at all times, but I know that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I use my real name on everything. People.
Well, trolls don't want to use their real names for obvious.
Trolls are trolls. That's why they're trolls.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but if you got something to say, put your name behind it.
There you go.
What I say.
There you go, Bruce Banner. We're talking to you. All right. So I appreciate all you guys for being here, though. That is the update. So if you're looking at the chat and you're wondering, all right, that's what's going on with it. Good to see everybody in here, though. Brandon Lewis is in here. Twiz, Jason A-Team, Jason Murdoch now. Jason, come on, man. You got to change that username. Jason A-Team is an iconic name here on the chat. Handsome Hustler's in here. Bruce Banner is in here. Ryan, what's up, Ryan? You're no longer just Ryan anymore. Izzy B's no longer just Izzy B. Joe Whip now has numbers. A little goofy, but we appreciate all of you guys being here. Hit that like button for us. We'll be right back on Birds 365 coming up in 3 minutes. Plenty of stuff to talk about here on this Football Friday. Let's get to 150 likes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes.